Okay, I see various friends. Oh, so nice to see all of you. I hope you are well on this day. Those our brethren in India aren't so well on this day because they got total chaos there. Total chaos. I think in Mayapur, 1,000 devotees probably have COVID. So odd times. We just had our Bhaktivedanta Institute meeting yesterday, and we're thinking of putting on a panel about vaccines. Some people who are all professionals and probably have somebody in favor, somebody against. Just to reveal personally, I've read 100 papers on it. I'm vaccinated, and I'm darn glad I did, but others feel differently. So we may do something like that just as a piece of news. Okay, we'll begin. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I just sang the devotee lullaby. Usually it's pretty good at getting devotees in the mood for a nap. We'll see what I can do to counteract that. We're doing verse today, just to be clear, is 9:469. And this particular chapter is very important for those of us who are aspiring for higher consciousness. One of the early books to come out in the movement was an interesting book, one that I find fascinating in every regard, short, sweet, very much to the point, and profoundly better than any self-help book I've ever read. Can anybody guess what book I'm thinking of? Anybody want to take a guess?
How about the Bhagavad Gita?
Well, certainly that's true for the Gita. So that's not bad, but there's a shorter book that's more explicit about the topic of self-help. The Gita certainly has a lot in it, so I that's a good answer.
The Science of Self-Realization?
That's kind of a thicker book. It does have some really good self-help chapters in it. Yes, Gaur Kumar guessed Nectar of Instruction. So they're all good answers. The Nectar of Instruction, oh, I see Andrea had her hand up. Thank you. No? Oh, it wasn't. Okay. The Nectar of Instruction is a particularly it's a particularly important book because it's an internal book for devotees. It's teaching us how to deal with each other, what to do, how to have good relations. And the verse we're going to read is about good relations. Ultimately, we have an enemy. And there was an old comic strip in America I've quoted from before, quote again, called Pogo. And in it, he had a saying, a very profound saying. It is, I have met the enemy. It is us. We're the enemy. And our own mind can often be the enemy. And the Nectar of Instruction deals with a particular enemy. And that enemy is discussed in Prabhupada's second pranam mantra. Who is the enemy? discussed in Prabhupada's second pranam mantra. Namaste Saraswati Devi. Who's the enemy discussed?
Impersonalism and voidism?
Yes, impersonalism and voidism. And now combine these two. What's the biggest enemy of that we have? It's ourselves. And what's the biggest enemy within ourselves? Impersonalism. We combine these two sayings. The enemy is our own mind, and the impersonalism and voidism are there. So impersonalism means I do not care about my relationships with others. Why? Because I am so important. As the Gita says, so much do I have today, so much will I have tomorrow. So I don't care about my relationship with others. The only thing I care about is three people. Who are the three people I care about?
Me, myself.
Me, myself.
Me, myself, and
Me,
I.
myself, and I, of course. So these three people are very, very important. Now, one could claim that's not an impersonalist, he's having relations. But we all know that doesn't work very well. So the nectar of instruction talks about relations, talks about how to have good relations. Now, I'm in ISKCON Resolve, and in ISKCON Resolve, we do mediations. And we do mediations. The number one issue we're dealing with is the T word. What's the T word? In relations. The T word. What is the T word?
Trust?
Trust. Absolutely. Trust is the T word. So we're dealing, the only reason ISKCON Resolve exists is because people lose trust in each other. It's very easy to lose trust. You just, you take a teacup. Here, I have my teacup, and I drop it, and in a moment, it's smashed. Now, I've mentioned before what the Japanese do when they drop their teacups. The Japanese are really into their teacups big time, though I don't think they call them China cups in Japan. But anyway, they're really into their teacups. And when a teacup drops, a traditional family will glue it together with an epoxy. Very time consuming because the epoxy is bedded with gold. It's embedded with gold. And then when that's put together, it takes a moment to break, takes a long time to piece together a cup in some dozens of pieces. So they glue it together. And that cup then is more valuable than before it broke. It's stronger because it's embedded with epoxy and it has gold in it. It's a very valuable cup then. So they use that as a metaphor for relationships. That when relationships break, they break very easily. Trust is lost in a moment. To bring it back takes hard work. Nectar of Instruction tells you how to do that hard work. And then when you do, the relationship is more valuable than before it broke. So that's a prelude into the verse that we're dealing with today. So without further ado, we'll get to the verse 9469. I'm going to ask someone to chant the verse and read the verse and then read the purport, because sometimes my voice wears out. Who would like to be my reader today? Do we have any volunteers? Hey, somebody volunteer. You hate for me to call on you. That embarrassed the hell out of you. Do we have one volunteer? Going once. Ah, yes. Okay. You're the volunteer. We have a volunteer.
I'm sorry, Prabhu, can you remind me what verse we're up to?
Yeah, sure. It is chapter 9.
Mhm.
Canto 9, chapter 4, verse 69. beginning upayam katayish yami.
Oh, I just realized I volunteered to read the Sanskrit. Oh, goodness.
You want someone else to do? I
No,
don't put you on the spot.
I mean, my Sanskrit expert is making breakfast, so I will have to do.
Okay.
Upayam kathayishyami tava viprashrinu swatat ayam hi atma vicharaste yatastam yahima shiram dadushu prahitam tejaha prahartu kurutesh shri shivam. Word by word too.
No, we'll skip that because there's generally a shorter class.
O Brahmana, let me now advise you for your own protection. Please hear from me. By offending Maharaj Ambarisha, you have acted with self-envy. Therefore, you should go to him immediately without a moment's delay. One's so-called prowess, when employed against a devotee, certainly harms he who employs it. Thus, it is the subject, not the object, who is harmed. Purport as well, Prabhu?
Please.
Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. A Vaishnava is always an object of envy for non-devotees, even when the non-devotee happens to be his father. To give a practical example, Hiranyakashipu was envious of Prahlad Maharaj, but this envy of the devotee was harmful to Hiranyakashipu, not to Prahlad. Every action taken by Hiranyakashipu against his son, Prahlad Maharaj, was taken very seriously by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And thus, when Hiranyakashipu was on the verge of killing Prahlad, the Lord personally appeared and killed Hiranyakashipu. Service to a Vaishnava gradually accumulates and becomes an asset for the devotee. Similarly, harmful activities directed against the devotee gradually become the ultimate cause of the performer's fall down. Even such a great Brahmana and mystic yogi as Durvasa was in a most dangerous situation because of his offense at the lotus feet of Maharaj Ambarish, a pure devotee.
Okay, thank you very much. You read very beautifully. You're a good reader. You could do audiobooks. Okay, I'm looking up a verse here for a moment. I forgot to pull up. So the context of the story is Maharaj Ambarish, who was a great king. When he was king, he had emperor of the planet. He had no attachment even to wife, kids, wealth, family. He really was totally into devotional service. And then he ran into a dilemma. Sometimes we get too ritualistic, like the Smarta Brahmins. And so this was one of those cases. Durvasa Muni came and he offered to feed him, but it was the Ekadasi the day before, so it was Devotee, so he wanted to break his fast. And Durvasa Muni went to take his bath before eating and took a long time. And so Ambarish didn't know what to do. On one side, when a great guest comes, you generally feed them before we take ourselves. That's a good standard. The second one is that you break the Ekadasi by a certain time. He didn't know what to do. He was quite bewildered. So he went to his Brahmins and said, "What do I do?" They said, "Well, don't eat, but just take a little water. That way you're still fasting, but you're not fasting. But you haven't really eaten before your guest." So that was like King Solomon giving some wisdom. a very nice wisdom. So he followed what the Brahmin said. And then Durvasa Muni, who was extremely powerful mystic, understood that his host had taken something before he ate. And Durvasa Muni was a grouch. And this is not the first time he's exhibited his extreme grouchiness. Sometimes great munis can be extremely grouchy. I mean, I know some devotees in the movement who are really great sadhus, but boy, are they a grouch. I mean, just some people are just grouchy. But Durvasa Muni was worse than a grouch. Being a grouch, you can be a Muni and be a grouch. Some people wonder, how can you be a Muni and be a grouch? But some people, as we used to say, are weaned on sour pickles. And they're just, by nature, a little grouchy. So we can understand that. But Durvasa Muni was worse. And in the Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna a reason why he's getting the most intimate instructions of bhakti yoga. He says, Krishna says to Arjuna, you are something, and for that reason, I can instruct you. What was the reason? Anybody help me with this?
Not envious.
Exactly. Not envious. So he wasn't envious, and therefore Arjuna could hear all these things. Now, if I'm envious, envy is the most dangerous emotion we could have. Anger will dissipate. You can get angry. You know, I'm at the Sunday feast, I'm sitting on the floor, and some devotee, he's walking around not paying attention, and he pours the the cold sweet rice right on my head. And then he turns to me after he does it. He says, oh my, look at that. Who can lick it up? And by the way, Prabhu, that's your karma. The sweet rice ended up on your head. Now, naturally, in a case like that, we might get a little angry. I mean, I don't want a bunch of people licking my head at a Sunday feast, and sometimes brahmacharis would do such things. So these things happen. You've been in the movement 50 years, like me, you've seen anything weird that can happen will happen. It's kind of like a Murphy's Law kind of approach to things. So this, so getting angry can happen, but a minute later, I'm not angry. But we get angry generally because we see injustice. When things aren't fair, we have a natural sense of getting angry. We see in America, there's a large Black Lives Matter movement because people in the Black community felt there was something unfair in that if a white guy is driving and he has an air freshener hanging from his window, nobody's going to pull him over. And if a Black guy is driving and he has an air freshener, somebody's going to pull him over. And it's a complex issue. I've been for 11 years on the advisory council to our police chief, who happens to be Black in Gainesville, very excellent chief, personal friend. But so I'm very intimately familiar with what the issue looks like from the side of the community and the side of the police. And the anger certainly comes from a sense of unfairness. Now, is anger justified or not justified? That's a whole other issue. But if a sense of fairness is restored, anger will dissipate in a moment. Envy is a little different. If I'm envious, the more I think about it, or the more time goes on, the deeper the envy gets. It gets deeper and deeper, where it just becomes rage. And sometimes if the envy just overwhelms us, all we can do is think of that person. And we can see the results we see sometimes in a family. One sibling becomes envious of the other sibling. And they'll do all kinds of horrible things. in this lead up to Maharaj Ambarish, there was the previous generation, the brothers were envious of their brother, and because of that, they put their brother in a very difficult position, and that envy can know no bounds. Envy is our biggest enemy after lust, and lust is so connected with envy, because lust means I am the center, I am the most important person. So for a devotee, for one who's trying to, not by devotee, I mean anybody who's trying to raise their consciousness, one of the most important things we can ever do is try to cut our envy. And any of us who say we have no envy is not very self-aware, because it's what keeps us in this world. So how do we get rid of envy? And getting rid of envy is what's discussed in this verse. So this is a very useful, practical verse, not just a story of a Sudarshan chakra chasing somebody. Now, Sudarshan chakra, when it's chasing you, that's not an ordinary thing. Sudarshan, there's a television station in India, I think it's called Duo Darshan, is that correct? Something like that. So what does darshan mean? Vision. And Su is good. So it means, Prabhupada translates it at one point as auspicious vision. And the Sudarshan chakra is described as the actual glance of Lord Vishnu. So the power of the Sudarshan chakra is way beyond anything that we know. And in this story, briefly, Durvasa Muni kind of cursed Ambarish, and it backfired on him. And Ambarish didn't take the curse seriously, but Lord Vishnu did, and he sent his Sudarshan chakra, and Durvasa Muni was so powerful, he went to Brahma's planet, went to Shiva's planet, and the Sudarshan chakra is chasing him. Finally, so powerful, he actually went to Vaikuntha, Narayan's planet. And then Narayan instructed him, there's only one way out of this. I can't even help you, though it happens to be my Sudarshan chakra, but I can't even help you. The only thing that can help you is get the mercy of the Vaishnava. So when we're envious, I remember years and years ago, I was at a class in Miami in the 80s, and sometimes you hear a class and you just remember it. And this class was given by Rameshwar, who speaks at the Bhakti Center, at least pre-COVID, quite regularly. And Rameshwar was, that time, one of the biggest leaders in the movement. Head of the BBT, GBC, so many posts. And Rameshwar gave a class talking about envy, and it really struck me for two reasons. One, like everyone, I thought, well, I'm not envious, that's the other people. And I understood that that's not the case, that there's some envy. And the second thing is, he said the simple, obvious, and only way to get rid of envy. Ooh, not one that I wanted to hear. So let us pretend I am very envious of Henry. After all, well, he doesn't have more hair, but he's more handsome. He's hangs around with the best of devotees all the time. And he goes on morning walks with Braja Bihari all the time and hangs out with all these people. And Yamuna lived in his house for a year or two, and Tamak Krishna Maharaj stayed in his house. And Bhakti True Swami would stay there all the time. And I'm thinking, he gets all this. I'm envious. I am. Why can't I have this? After all, I'm quite wonderful. Why can't I have it? What am I to do if I feel those thoughts arising in me? What am I supposed to do? And Rameshwar said in the class what to do. Can someone tell me, what do I do when I feel that way? I mean, let me put out some options. One thing I can do is I can go and hurt him. When I was a nasty 10 or 12-year-old, there was a neighbor who I didn't like I don't even know why. So this is horrible what I did, but it's like envy. And instead of going over to him say, hey, can I take out your garbage, older person, or do something? I scooped up a bag of dog poop, put it in a paper bag, covered it with lighter fluid, put it on their front porch, lit it, hid behind a bush, rang their doorbell, and watched them stamp out the fire. A horrible thing. I actually did something like that. I just can't believe I was kind of a rascal at that age. And I could have gone and said, can I do something for you? And they would have become like that Chinese cup, whatever reason I didn't like them. Maybe they were mean or said something nasty to me. But my heart then became envious and acted inappropriately. So if I was envious, if I'm envious of Henry, let's say, what can I do? Somebody help me out. Otherwise, I might be lighting a bag of something on Henry's front porch tomorrow.
That was such a good trick. But actually, even before you said that story, I was thinking that you could find a way to be of service to that person. Another thing I was thinking was try and think of some positive qualities about that person.
You said the two best answers there are. The first thing I do if I feel envious, especially among devotees, is try to offer some service. Prabhu, can I clean the sweet rice off your head I just dropped? We offer some service, not telling them it's their karma. So that's most helpful. And what was the second thing you said? Repeat that, please.
That you can try to think of some positive qualities about the person.
How many? I give you, there's a number.
A number, at least about 10.
Well, that's good. Bhakti Siddhanta said, I believe it was, before you criticize someone, say 5 nice things about them. You say 5 nice things. So and sometimes for the sake of management, we have to criticize others. It's just the nature of things. One devotee was telling me this story. A very intelligent, scholarly devotee was going to become a ship captain, like on Yaladuta in Bengal. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj was staying at his house and convinced him to become a scholar. And he went and got his PhD on Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And then when Tamal Krishna was visiting, Tamal Krishna Maharaj said to him, now, well, he was ready to get initiated. So at his own house, Tamal Krishna initiated him. And everything was very friendly. Then right after initiation, Tamal Krishna Maharaj calls him in, says, look at my bathroom. There's mold in it. Now, if you're in Calcutta, and I lived in Calcutta, it's hard to find any place without mold. It's, it's sea level, it's humid, and it's India. So he said, I want you to scrub it. And he chastised him severely. And he made him, here he is, just became a devotee. He's from, it's his own home that TKG staying in. There are servants in the home. And he makes, you might say, the master of the home go and scrub the bathroom himself. And he made him do it for an hour. Scrub it, and scrub it, and scrub it. And then later on, Tamal Krishna Maharaj said to him, he came that night and he says, I apologize that I put you through that. But our relationship changed now when I became your spiritual master. And we had to get to a new level of seriousness. So I have to put you through this. And he explained it to him. And Prabhupada also did that. Sometimes he'd be heavy and then he would just explain that that's his duty to do it. And it was not done out of any negative emotion, but it was a duty. And this devotee was so impacted by what TKG said to him. So even though he had put him through a torture that when he was doing it, he couldn't understand it. He was cleaning with muriatic acid and his eyes were tearing and this whole thing was, and scrubbing to get rid of all the green slime that seems to be everywhere in Calcutta. And TKG insisted he do it. And later he understood this was the best thing that could happen because he realized that now that Tamal Krishna, my spiritual master, I have to stop treating him as entirely an equal. Otherwise, I'll get very envious. And he nipped the envy in the bud. It was very clever what happened. And as Henry knows, TKG was, unfortunately, he left us, but he was super expert at this, one of the most expert at this than anybody I know. And he was also, he was, as we say, bittersweet. Could be so the heaviest and the sweetest. So it's a matter of us getting rid of our envy. So in this particular story, to pull us back to the verse, here we have a case of Hiranyakasipu in the purport. He was envious of his son. He wanted to, Hiranyakasipu was envious of Prahlad. But this envy of devotee was harmful to Hiranyakasipu, not to Prahlad. Now, can you think of someone who is a great acharya in our line, who was a great translator of books, and who had a son who was envious? Great acharya, wonderful acharya, the best of acharyas. I knew him.
Srila Prabhupada?
Yes, Prabhupada. And after Prabhupada passed on, his oldest son sued ISKCON. And now his younger son, Vrindavan, was always favorable. In fact, when Prabhupada went off to America in the Jaladuta, that was the only relative to greet him in Calcutta, though the family was in that area. He was the only one. Of course, his wife wouldn't go because he was a Swami, but Vrindavan sold Prabhupada's books and was very favorable. But his first son was kind of envious. So his first son went to court and declared, my father really wasn't a sannyas for whatever silly technical reason he made up. I don't know what he made up, but something. Therefore, the right of inheritance applies, and all the copyrights of my father's books belong to me. And therefore, all the profits in the BBT are mine, and the temples that were built from the profits are mine. And basically, I own everything in ISKCON. That was a lawsuit. And it went on for years and years. Obviously, we won the suit. But this is the case of a son being envious of a father, and we have the case of Hiranyakasipu, the father being envious of the son. So we see how dangerous this is. It's not like anger that usually dissipates quickly. So, Prabhupada says in the purport, harmful activities directed against the devotee gradually become the ultimate cause of the performer's fall down. Now, because he committed offense. Now, when we're driving down the highway, let's say there's a ditch on either side of the road. it doesn't make a difference if we go into the left ditch or the right ditch. We're still in a ditch. So there are two ditches here to avoid. One ditch is committing offenses against devotees out of envy. And the other ditch, to think any normal reaction is an offense, and I'm so scared of offenses, I keep my mouth shut and I can't do anything. When we're talking about offenses here, we're not talking about I stepped on somebody's toe accidentally, or I did this, or, I took a little more maha than I was supposed to, or, we're not talking about these kind of things. We're talking about serious offenses, and we all should know what that means. Sometimes I've seen devotees don't care at all about committing offenses, and when I watch it happen, it's as if I'm a fortune teller, and I'm looking in my crystal ball, and I know what's going to happen to them, and it's so unpleasant. I feel so sad. So, on the other hand, I've seen devotees and those in other spiritual traditions who understand the danger of offense be so scared of offense that they're powerless and they become frozen and can't do anything. Offenses doesn't mean, as Krishna describes in the Gita, some accidental activity. It means those things that come from envy in the heart. And one of the offenses that's the most serious offense is what's and when we're chanting the holy name, what's the most serious offense we can do? It's the first offense.
Checking Facebook.
Well, that is an offense. Yes.
Being inattentive while chanting.
No, yeah.
No,
Well,
no, it's blaspheming the pure devotees.
yes,
Those
yes.
Those who have tried to spread Krishna consciousness, sacrifice their lives doing so.
Yeah, well, blaspheming the devotees, criticizing unnecessarily. Prabhupada was sometimes heavily criticized, even by his godbrothers. Oh, you have let women in your ashram. You are a sannyas. You have performed weddings. You are so fallen. And Prabhupada later said, when I came to the West, I saw the egalitarian nature of men and women. And if I hadn't treated them equally, then my whole movement would have failed. That's Prabhupada's statement. Because Prabhupada saw the important thing was spreading Krishna consciousness. He came from conservative society that had a greater separation. When he went to the West, there was less, so he opened up brahmacharya ashrams and followed the example of his guru and he said, in the West, people are more equal. And that's some of our vision is Samadarshana. We're seeing people as souls, not as bodies. And so Prabhupada was very liberal, and he got so criticized. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati got so criticized for driving in a motor car because the tradition was Swamis walked. And he said, but I can do a lot more preaching if I go in the car. I can do, 5, 10 towns in a day, not one. So he went in the car and wore a nice watch. And Bhakti Vinod Thakur took great steps to be accepted in the society, because this was a British Empire, in the British society, so that he'd have a powerful position, which enabled him to do much more effective as a preacher. People respected someone as district magistrate. And and Prabhupada even would walk his dog Bhakti Vinod Thakur would even walk his dog named Tiger. He had a dog named Tiger. So what matters is the attitude of what can we do to accomplish Lord Chaitanya's mission. And sometimes when we do things, especially if they're innovative, people will criticize. one time Prabhupada was walking by the Brahmacharya ashram in Denver. I was there, but I wasn't there at this moment, but I know the story well. And one of Prabhupada's secretaries was a sannyas, and he was having a lot of spiritual trouble. Eventually, he left the ashram. So Prabhupada walked by the ashram, and he heard the devotees gossiping. Oh, so-and-so Swami, he hasn't chanted his rounds in weeks. We're watching, and this, and he's talking to a lady, or whatever it was. They were criticizing, and Prabhupada heard it. And later on, Prabhupada called all the devotees, and he was so angry. Now, Prabhupada's anger would only last for a moment, sometimes a microsecond, but this lasted a little longer. He said, "You're gossiping about this person." And Prabhupada understood he was going to leave his post as a sannyas. And that was okay with Prabhupada. The very first sannyas in the movement to leave his post as a sannyas, Prabhupada actually performed the wedding ceremony. It's on video. It's on Yadavar's first video. You can see it. He actually performed the wedding ceremony. So Prabhupada was not interested in ritualistic details. So Prabhupada was so angry at the devotees because by you criticizing him, when he leaves, he won't be able to come back. Because for one who has been honored, Swami, blah, 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 dishonor is worse than death, are the words from the Gita, worse than death. So Prabhupada knew that if this gossip would get back to this Swami, and it would, that he'd be so discouraged. And Prabhupada was so sad. This is the worst thing you can do, this gossip. Oh, so-and-so has trouble. That's envy. Oh, I'm so-and-so's a Swami, but I'm better. I don't have that trouble. The best thing we can do if someone has trouble is try to serve them, try to help them, and do what's best for them, not what's best for us. And so how does this story end with Maharaj Ambarish? Well, when Durvasa Muni was told by Vishnu, go back and beg forgiveness. Vishnu, even though it's his Sudarshan chakra, I can't help you. Sudarshan chakra is a mind of its own. Only Ambarish can stop. He went back to Ambarish and he apologized, and I really blew it, and I'm sorry, and I'm a rascal. What did Ambarish do? Ambarish was quite embarrassed. You're such a great sage. I'm just a lowly king. And Ambarish immediately offered wonderful, wonderful prayers to Sudarshan Chakra. And Sudarshan Chakra then said, okay, and left. Immediately, he just offered prayers, and he said, please give relief to this Brahmin. He says, if I've done any pious activities, myself or my family, please accept these pious activities and take the chakra away. In other words, we do pious activities, we get good karma. He's in essence saying, if I've earned any good karma, he did so much pious activities, I cast it away, my good karma. I just cast it away. I give it to Durvasa Muni. So please release him from this. And Durvasa Muni's envy dissipated, and he became less grouchy. But he was still kind of grouchy, but he's at least not envious. So with that, that's some of the lessons from today's verse. It's 4 minutes after 8. I was told we can go slightly longer. So I'll stop here and see if there are any questions, comments, criticisms. If anybody's envious of me, let me have it right now. It's a good time.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, wonderful class. Thank you very much. What's the difference between anger and envy, please?
Well, I mean, envy means I want what you have. Anger means I'm just upset. It's not right. It's not fair. See, I can be angry because something isn't fair. If Um, if somebody is being unnecessarily hurt, improperly, if in the justice system there's not justice going on, I can get angry about that. But that's not envy. Envy means I don't want your success. I'm hoping you fail. I'm hoping it doesn't work. Yeah. And does that answer your question? It's an important question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Let me see. And I got a note from Amish Patel, and I will respond. Maybe you and I can speak later too. I'll send you my phone number also, just to let you know. And we can definitely talk about the COVID panel idea. I will say that just for the record, some people have their concerns. I spent many hours last night. I had a dear friend of mine who's one of the #1 doctors at the teaching hospital in town came over we haven't seen each other in a year, and we're very, very close. And a world famous doctor, and he came over last night to sit in our backyard and finally meet up. We've all been vaccinated, and we went over the science of the vaccine, which I read 100 papers on, and I'd say 99% of what I have read in opposition to vaccines is not based on science. I'll just share my opinion. I realize others will have different opinions. But as the head of the Bhaktivedanta Institute, we will not take an official position because I don't want to get into the politics of it. But personally, I just hope everyone gets vaccinated. And since I've been vaccinated, every time I pass a 5G tower, I start glowing, so I know it works well. So I just share that with you. I get images of Bill Gates in my head and little Dr. Fauci's dancing on my shoulders, and it's so very, very effective. Okay, are there any other questions or comments or criticisms? Yes, go on. Andrea, please.
Hare Krishna. I was wanting to go back to the idea that we should renounce criticism of others because of like offending devotees is a stumbling block in the path of pure devotional service, and criticism can lead to that. But how do we balance that with if we do see like an injustice, or we see something that we would like to see change because we do feel it's unfair to others? How do we balance that with not wanting to criticize devotees if we see that something should be changed because it is unfair? I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
Yeah, making yourself very clear. That's really one of the most important questions we can ask, because we're in a society. Now, let's say I am temple president someplace, and I don't criticize anybody. I will have a horrible temple. You know, the pujari is late for the offerings. The kitchen is dirty. People have to be trained. I was a Gurukula headmaster at one time. I've done a lot of management, and sometimes I have to criticize people. But it has to be done the way Radhanath Swami does it. I've been with him where disciples wayward or somebody's not doing a good job, and how he criticizes. And he always does it with a lot of love. That's how Prabhupada did it. So he may even be a moment of anger. How could you do something like that? But the anger dissipates. It's done with love, with the intent to reform the person who's having the trouble, to help them. So if it's done out of love, not envy, then sometimes it has to be done because we have that responsibility. Now, there was this circumstance in New York. I mentioned that Prabhupada had married this one sannyas. And the person he married was a rascal. And she had claimed to be heir of the Toyota family, but she wasn't. And she became the queen of the New York Temple in the 70s. And she did horrible things. And sometimes she would even offer unedibles, unofferable foodstuffs to Radha Govinda, the worshipful deities. And it was I was in graduate school in New Jersey, and every week a devotee would, as we would say in the parlance, bloop. Bloop didn't mean leaving the movement in those days. Bloop meant leaving your temple. You were sort of like when you were part of a temple, because we're an ashram society, you were like the baseball team. Like if you're owned by the Mets, you can't go play for the Yankees. It was something like that. So, and they would leave, come to my apartment for a few days so they could find another temple to take them. There was no internet or email then, so you had to phone around or whatever. And this was going on every week. And it was just this horrible scene. Then 3 devotees, one of them Gopal Krishna Maharaj, they stood in front of the temple one day. This was on 439 Henry Street. And they stood in front of the door and they said to the temple president, "You cannot come in this temple." And they blocked him. 2 of those devotees, Prabhupada was so proud of them that they did the right thing. They stood up. That Prabhupada made them GBC men, including Gopal Krishna Maharaj, who was a Grahasta then. Prabhupada then chastised the leaders who didn't stand up for what was right. Prabhupada praised the devotees who were ordinary devotees, just doing their service in the temple, tolerated the discrepancies, but stuck with their service anyway, and didn't try to do anything because that wasn't their service. So each of the devotees had their own role. Now, I was just a bhakta then. I wasn't, I wasn't even initiated, and seeing all this go on. And that devotee, the temple president, Prabhupada had personally told me when I came back to America, you have any questions, he's the one you see. And all this weirdness going on. And I was wondering, why is this happening to me? Well, later on, I discovered why. Because I watched how Prabhupada dealt with one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in ISKCON. I mean, offering, animals to the deities. I mean, just so outrageous you can't even begin to describe it. And so many outrageous things. That I got an inoculation. And I don't know how long the COVID inoculation lasts, but I know when I had smallpox as a child, for the rest of my life, I'm not going to get smallpox. It's that effective. Smallpox, as an aside, is the oldest vaccine that we know of. It was invented during the Revolutionary War in America. That was the first vaccine. So the smallpox vaccine, there's a whole fascinating story on that. So I know my whole life I won't get smallpox. I may get COVID, maybe a year from now it doesn't work. Nobody knows. But I'm not going to get smallpox this life. Similarly, after I got the vaccine of watching how Prabhupada dealt with the weirdest thing I could see, whatever weirdness I faced for the next half century in ISKCON, it would never disturb my faith. And I do ISKCON Resolve. Remember, ISKCON Resolve, we are the portable toilet of ISKCON. We are the toilet. We get the worst of the worst. and the fights and the most difficult of circumstances. And I could never have done the service I'm doing now if I hadn't gotten that inoculation over this incident back in the mid-70s in New York. It was a great inoculation for me. So to answer your specific question, those devotees who were not empowered to be in management, they stuck with their service anyway and just tolerated. Those devotees who were in a management position and didn't do something because it was wrong, Prabhupada chastised them. Those devotees who were in a management position or leaders and did something, Prabhupada greatly praised them and even made them GBC men. So you see, everyone was dealt with differently according to their particular position. So one man's food might be another man's poison. So if some devotee sees a discrepancy in the temple, my temple president, he's wonderful, he's great, but every morning I smell alcohol on his breath. That's happened. I know one temple president, he was sick. So he went to an Ayurvedic doctor. The Ayurvedic doctor gave him the herbs to take. And the herbs were dissolved in alcohol. Basically, it was herbs and vodka. Because many Ayurvedic medicines are a tincture, which is alcohol. And he became an alcoholic from Ayurvedic medicine. I know another senior devotee who now he's detoxing. He took also Ayurvedic medicine, but now he has the highest level of lead poisoning his doctor has ever seen. So we have to be careful of these things. Some Ayurvedic is very good, and some of it we do have to wonder. And in this, so let's say the temple president, he has alcohol on his breath, and I'm an ordinary devotee. When I'm going to march up to him and say in front of the whole temple, "You're a nonsense, get out of here." Yeah, no. But if I'm another leader in the temple, I'm going to confront him about it privately or talk to his mentor or his guru or GBC and say, "Ooh, we have a problem." I do it confidentially. I don't do it publicly. And so I do it. And if I'm an ordinary devotee, I go to my leaders and say, "I think we have a problem. I just want you to be aware of that." And then I tolerate and let the leaders do what they're supposed to do. That's Prabhupada's system with a lot of checks and balances, like the American government has a checks and balance. We have the courts and the dysfunctional Congress and sometimes dysfunctional president and sometimes dysfunctional courts, but there's a checks and balance so no one gets too powerful. So Prabhupada very intelligently has it. We have leaders and we have mentors and we have GBC and Prabhupada's system. And if you disagree with even the GBC is making big mistakes, I would say you should privately go to the neighboring GBC and say, "Look, this is not right." And eventually, I've never seen Krishna not rectify things. When I was in New York, it was a nightmare. And then one day the nightmare was over. It just ended. It was over. Remember, I was running a preaching center. I don't like the word preaching center, an outreach center in Ohio in the 80s. And I used to bring all my students to New Vrindavan. And then the leader of New Vrindavan got hit on the head and went crazy, really crazy. And it was such a discrepancy, what to do. And then one day, the discrepancy is over. It's always like that. I've never seen an exception. So some of us have the job to be patient, and some of us have the job to do something, and all of us have to listen to the serenity prayer. God, give me the intelligence to know the difference between changing what I can change and tolerating what I'm supposed to tolerate. And so I live by the serenity prayer. I hope that answers your question. It's a very good question. Okay, I think we're out of time now. It's 8:20. I thank you all very much for being with me at this class and staying even a little over time. I hope you have all a good day. If you have friends or relatives in India, this is a good time to reach out to them and let them know that you care. If you have friends in Brazil, same thing, or other places that are being totally devastated in ways beyond compare. It's a good time to reach out and say, I'm here for you. I'm concerned. You have, if nothing else, you have my prayers. It's a very good time to do that. When Prabhupada formed International Society, the word society is very important. We had more time. We can go into the derivation of that word and how it happened. But no time for that. But at least I'll say it means that we help each other. That's what it means. Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you all have a good and blessed day. Hare Krishna.
This is Brahmatir Prabhu ki jai. Thank you so much.
Hi, Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
My